Hey, everybody, Dr. Tom Moorcroft back here with you for this episode of the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit. And I am really so stoked for today's conversation with Jana Дэниелсон. She is an award-winning wellness entrepreneur and really very similar to my story. She had her own experience of physical pains where she ended up learning to turn her mess into her message. And now it's really become this big mission to help you guys learn all about the things that we're going to be talking about today. One of the things that's really great about her, she's the host of the Medicine of Mindset Summit. And that's actually how we met. And we had this amazing conversation that just dovetails so well into true healing. And so, Jana, that's why I wanted to have you come join us today, and welcome.
Dr. Tom, thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, I'm excited because when we last chatted, we talked about having a conversation about the movement of medicine, I should say movement as medicine trifecta, a thing you talk about a lot, where we bring your work with Pilates and posture and the pelvic floor together and really explore how that leads to total healing, not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. And as a lot of people who are watching know, that's really where, yoga was the thing that kind of saved my life when I didn't know I had chronic Lyme disease and babesia, heavy metal toxicity, and my body was kind of shutting down, saying, Tom, pay attention. So I'm really excited to kind of start this conversation about your experience of this. And maybe you could just, for everybody, tell us a little bit about your journey, where you came from, and how does it lead you to the work that you're doing today?
Yeah, no, that's a great place to start. So I I grew up in, a small farming community in the prairies of Canada. So my childhood was like lots of open space, acres of garden, grumbling when we had to go, weed or hill potatoes. Yet it was such a simple way of being brought up, right? I mean, you had to play all the sports or your high school didn't have enough people for the team. And being the daughter of, a farm family, you also knew that you really did live and die by the weather. An early frost, too much rain, not enough rain, certain, bugs that were eating your crop. And so it was a little bit more of a high stress experience growing up. And my dad, I always remembered my dad, wherever he was, he had rolls of Tums, so the antacids, right? And he would pop them kind of like breath mints. And because he had a lot of stomach issues. And so as I was into my high school years, I started experiencing the same thing. And everyone just thought, oh, it's just like my dad. And when I got to university, the pain started to increase more. It was digestive in nature, right near my belly button, almost like a baseball size. And I used to connect the dots between, going to write an exam or going for a job interview with my pain. But soon I couldn't actually connect those dots anymore because it was happening all the time. And I began a 2-year journey going to, my doctor, who then, like a baton in a track and field relay race, was passed and passed and passed to different specialists. And I drank every drink. I got poked and prodded. I had lots of blood drawn with, crossing my fingers, praying to God every time I would go to the next appointment, there would be some clarity, a little bit, on what was going on with me. I just wanted that thing. What was it? So that I could then heal. And I ended up at just 21 years old on 11 different medications and being told by my medical team that they believed that the pain was in my head and that I was seeking attention. And I don't care how old you are, when you trust somebody and you're looking to them to help you, and that's the messaging you get, it doesn't feel very good. And I went into a depression, and I believed that at that point that my body was not serving me. For some reason, I got dealt a hand. What did I do to deserve this? I was newly engaged, wanted to own my own business, be a mom. And I thought, how will any of that actually happen? And in your story, yoga, you just mentioned how yoga saved your life. For me, it was Pilates. And I saw Madonna on the cover of a fitness magazine in 1999, and it had the word Pilates splashed across it. And I bought the magazine. And I went home and I read the article, and it made no sense to me. And so I read it again and again and again, because it talked about this form of exercise that looked like yoga to me because there was pictures on a mat. And it talked about all the different ways that it could heal. It talked about things like diaphragmatic breathing and the 5 spinal movements and this guy named Joe Pilates and posture. And I used to teach fitness to pay my tuition through university. And I had this disconnect because it didn't look like there was a puddle of sweat on the floor. It didn't look like there was, muscles that were in pain the next day, which is how I used to determine if my workout was good or not, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how it started. And can I tell you, within about 16 weeks of doing Pilates mat work, I was off all my medication. I didn't understand why, but my healing, what I realized was I was looking outward for my healing. And I needed to, first of all, look within. And once I understood that, my body responded in a beautifully positive way.
Jana, I mean, that is so amazing, because I think this story probably resonates with so many people listening. It certainly does with me. I'm just going, oh my God, same exact thing. It's just like pass from one person to the other, one concoction to the next potion, to the next test, to the, hey, it's all in your head. I mean, my God, how many times have we all heard this? But then it's like, and then we start to think maybe they're right. And it's like you said, almost like we've experienced it, like my body is betraying me. My body's letting me down. And I'm like, my body, what I learned in the long run is my body was screaming out to tell me what I needed to focus on to actually get better. And I would love you to kind of tell us more about like it's interesting. You provided me this little quote from Joe Pilates about physical fitness is the first prerequisite to happiness. And I'm just thinking, like, to me, physical fitness was always totally measured exact. It was like, how sore are you? How much did you lift? How far did you run? But then ultimately in my illness, I went and I was like, my physical fitness actually became the thing that led to my mental and emotional wellness. And then my body healing followed my emotional wellness. And then when I saw that quote, I was like, damn. So tell me more about what that means to you and where this goes for us.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously when I started healing my body, I was intrigued. And I did a business degree. I did an undergraduate in business and a master's in business. And yet there was something pulling me to learn more about the body. And so I went and did my Pilates certification, and since then have done a lot more with that. And I realized that we frame the body in a really unfortunate way. We frame it as pieces, arms and legs, and we got to get our cardio in. So we talk about these pieces, yet the body is a series of systems. We have bones. We're going to talk about posture later. So we have a skeletal system. We have blood. We have a circulatory system. We have a digestive system. We've got, a lymphatic system, which is the body's, innate natural garbage disposal system. We have all these systems that impact each other. So when I shared that quote with you, it really was because I come back to that all the time. Dr. Joe Dispenza says the thoughts are the language of our mind, and feelings is the language of our body. And yet we become so conditioned in this autopilot mode where, we're in line at the grocery store and, the clerk asks us how we are and we say, good, how are you? Like, we have these canned answers all the time. But yet inside, like with me, there was so much disconnect because I was saying, good, I'm doing good. And inside my body's like, but no, you're not. No, you're not. Like, there's all this pain. There's all this, there's all this disconnect, and there's a lack of trust in your body. And I figuratively and literally lost my voice. I stopped making hair appointments and stuff like that. And so when you think about happiness, the physicality of moving your bones, which means you're then moving your muscles, which means then you have to be breathing in fresh air using our diaphragm. Our metabolism is impacted by that. How we eliminate waste is impacted by that. And so when it comes right down to it, and maybe some of you have heard this analogy of the $1 million racehorse. If you owned $1 million racehorse, how would you treat that horse? How would you treat that asset? You would darn well make sure it had the best nutrition. It had the best trainers. It had a great barn that it could live in. You would not ride your horse through a fast food lineup. That's exactly the way it is with our body. Why this is what we got. We weren't born with replacement parts, yet we can get replacements if we need during our life, but this was it. And that's what I learned through my early days of Pilates training, was that when we can move with ease, it ensures that the body's functions are being supported by that. So the physicality plugs into the emotionality and the mental side of the body. And then there's also that spiritual piece, which I think so many of us are, just starting to explore and bring into the realm of our physical wellness.
Oh, it's just, I love it. Like, I love the $1 million racehorse is a concept. Like, I never really thought of it, like heard it put that way, but I totally know what you're talking about. It's like, because like, seriously, I think about all the time, like if it were your kid on the, on the other, like if there's this big ravine that you had to jump over and your kid's on the other side and you had to find a way to go across this itsy bitsy little like rope bridge to go save them. And you could fall 200 feet to your death, into a river, whatever, in the Amazon. If I asked you to do that for yourself, you'd be like, that's kind of dangerous. I don't know about that. Maybe I'll just go have another Big Mac or whatever. But if it were your kid, your ass would be across the thing like right away, right?
Absolutely.
So I love the concept of that $1 million racehorse, because like, why don't we treat ourselves as the $1 million racehorse? You said something that, I mean, boy, there's so many pieces. Like I love Dr. Joe always just reminds me there's possibility, right? And to think differently if you want a different result than you're getting today. But one of the things that I really love talking about is when you talk about diaphragmatic breathing, one of the things that I learned in yoga was, because a lot of people I learned Ashtanga yoga, and a lot of people are like, well, that's like where power yoga comes from. It's really hard. How could you even do that with Lyme? I'm like, wait a second. My teacher said yoga is movement on breath. And so if I couldn't breathe fully, I was actually pushing too hard. And I was doing the first thing you said in the beginning about the sort of making it a workout and making it about physical accomplishment. So how do you look at it from your perspective, your background? Because diaphragmatic breathing to me does so many different things. So I'd love to hear chat a little bit about the diaphragm.
For sure. And I'm gonna root this in another Joe Pilates quote, because he said, breath is the first and the last act of life. And somewhere in the middle, we forget how to do it. And it's so true. You watch a newborn baby breathe, their belly rises and falls with every single breath. Just to give an idea of like, the muscle we're talking about, the diaphragm, it just sits in the crest of the ribs. It's like a mushroom cap or an open umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
And here's what happens, right, with the physiology of our body. When we don't tap into that muscle, the body just is like, oh, we'll find another group to help out. So we've got these secondary breathing muscles in our neck. They're called the scalenes and the sternocleidomastoids, and they're like little strips of beef jerky, right? And they already have a job. That job is to hold up the head. And now we're asking these little muscles to also be the main breathers. That becomes a problem. And here's why. We breathe about 86,000 times a day. So we're asking these little muscles that are supposed to be the best supporting actor in the film, right, to be the lead role. And they're like, wait, I can help out, but I've also got this job to hold this bowling ball, right, on the spine. So we actually stop using the diaphragm altogether. And what happens when a muscle is not being utilized is it just goes into like a hibernation. And there's so much we can unpack there. And we'll talk about pelvic floor in a little bit, but when you breathe diaphragmatically, and that is, in your nose, out of your mouth, your belly is rising and falling like that newborn baby, you're actually taking in about 600% more oxygen. All right. Now, I'm not saying you have to breathe that way 24/7, but if you find 2 or 3 times in your day to do 8 to 12 breath cycles in through your nose and out through your mouth, and hands on, this flat bone here is called your sternum. If you put one hand on your sternum and one hand down on your belly button, when you inhale, it's the bottom hand is your target. That's what should be filling with air. And then on the exhale, you think about drawing that belly button away from the bottom hand. For those of you who practice this and you feel your top hand doing more breathing, all that's simply telling you is you've conditioned these muscles to be the main breathers. And we just need to, shift their job description a little bit. And over time, that will start to change. We can create a new neural network, 100%. It just takes time and patience and the right information to know what you're doing. That's all it takes. So what does 600% more oxygen mean? It means, your 50 to 70 trillion cells have the vitality they need to do their job. Then you sprinkle in the right amount of hydration and the right nutrition, and you literally start to create a body that can heal in a more effective way, that can, we can prevent injuries in a different way, who have, this body has a better sleep at night. This body can metabolize its food better. Like it's these systems that are so interrelated. And when you give the body the basics, which breath is like a basic, I would say, it's phenomenal what will happen.
Well, Jenna, I mean, breath is free and it's also required, right? I mean, so like, I'm just thinking like it always blows my mind, because then I'm automatically going, wow, how many people have headaches and neck pain and shoulder pain? Start with breathing. How many people are like, I have irritable bowel syndrome, or I have like a lot of anxiety? I'm like, well, our solar plexus region is right below the diaphragm. And one of the ways that we relax it, especially when we're all hyped up in that sympathetic state, or even that freeze state that a lot of us get into in chronic illness, is the diaphragm manually massaging, the solar plexus. And lo and behold, you said something earlier that I'd love you to dive into from your perspective, because as you guys may tell already, like I'm like an anatomy physiology nerd, like osteopaths love this stuff and eat it all up. So like, this is such a fun conversation, but it's like, when you look at we all want to detoxify more. Well, we've got cisterna chyli, which is this sort of almost like grand central station of the lower part of our lymphatic system, draining the entire abdomen and the legs. That's right in the same area. And the thing that moves it is pressure gradient changes driven by two main things. One that we've talked about, the diaphragm, the thoracic breathing diaphragm. The other one is the pelvic floor. So lymphatics and the pelvic floor, because if you want to heal from all these things that we think are related to chronic Lyme and other things, let's optimize the body through here, because some of it might disappear like happened to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to the pelvic floor is, or we've been told, watching commercials and seeing billboards, that as we age, there are just some things we have to expect. So as we age, we might expect our hair to turn gray. We might expect our skin to, show our experiences through wrinkles. We're also told that as we age, we should expect some incontinence, right? Because our pelvic floor starts to become less functional. And here's where I'm going to get on my soapbox here, Dr. Tom.
Please do.
And this is why I created the Cooch and Gooch ball, because no one is talking about this part of the body this way. I feel like people need to understand, first of all, that the core, so our core, is more than just the 6-pack abdominals. All right. We've got 4 sets of abdominals. The rectus ab, yes, is the 6-pack. We chase it and chase it and chase it. And just a very small percentage of us ever see those muscle striations. And actually, at the end of the day, who cares, right? So we have the rectus abs. Then beneath that, we have the obliques that act like an X. The external obliques kind of interact with the internal obliques on the opposite side of the body. So, you see sometimes construction workers, or they're wearing those safety vests with the big fluorescent X. That's like our obliques. Deepest to that is our transverse abs. They start in our back and they wrap to our front like a corset or a big weight training belt. We talked about the diaphragm. The diaphragm becomes the roof of the core. All right. And then there's the floor. The floor, ladies and gentlemen, is your pelvic floor. So the core of the body is literally a cylinder, a 360-degree cylindrical system with a roof and a floor. Here's the beautiful part of this. The diaphragm and the pelvic floor are like BFFs. They love each other. And when one responds or not, the other responds or not. So when we're not actively breathing with our diaphragm, the pelvic floor gets that message. And the pelvic floor is like, oh, all right, I guess I'll also go on a vacation, right? And so then we live on a planet with gravity. We have babies, we have sports injuries, we walk around with a wallet or a phone in our back pocket, we stand with too much weight forward on our toes. We've had motor vehicle accidents. All these things leave their thumbprint on our body. So over time, we start to cough or sneeze or laugh and maybe pee a little bit. For guys, it can show up as erectile dysfunction, pelvic floor pain, chronic tight hips, low-grade low back pain that just you can't get a handle on, cold tingly feet, constipation. And these are all things that I'm connecting to pelvic floor dysfunction. People just think, if I had a baby, I got pelvic floor stuff going on. Or I'm in menopause, I got pelvic floor stuff going on. I just post prostate cancer surgery, right? Like there's all these things that we connect these dots. And here's how simple this is, everyone. When you start to learn how to use your diaphragm in an impactful way, your pelvic floor, it's like giving CPR to your pelvic floor just by virtue of breathing properly. You are going to bring function back. And here's the beautiful thing is that the main nerve that goes from our brain to that area of our body is called the pudendal nerve. It has two jobs. It's got a sensory job, which means sensation, and motor, which means messaging. When we wake up that muscular tissue and the diaphragm starts, the pelvic floor diaphragm starts to move in conjunction with your diaphragm muscle, they work together, all right? You actually can start to, turn back the hands of time in a way. You can bring confidence back. You can bring sensuality back. And when we bring oxygen, nutrient-rich blood to that area, we can literally change the function of what you're experiencing in your body.
Jana, this is insane because the some of the cool parts, this is like how the body works. Like I am just enamored with how amazing the physical human being's body is. And you highlighted a few symptoms that I think that are obviously like, hey, I've had a baby or prostate cancer and somebody's done something there. But we have a lot of people who have back pain and leg pain. I have a ton of people who are like, hey, as soon as you said, hey, cold feet, I'm like, how many people say they have Raynaud's because they were all about labeling? I want to tell a quick little story. And I saw someone who had 3.5 years of ulcerative colitis that was uncontrolled on a bunch of meds, just kind of like your story. So, I mean, this girl was in college. She was on all these meds and she happened to go to the same undergrad college as I did, the University of Vermont. So I really felt it, but she would go to the restroom in another dorm at 2 a.m. because she had blood and mucus and foul smelling stools, losing weight, the whole 9 yards. And 1 or 2 times a year, every single year since it started, she would be hospitalized on steroids. And then they would get her stable. She would go home, but she was never fixed. And so then she comes in to see me and she's like, hey, Dr. Tom, like I was doing a fellowship in manual medicine, osteopathic treatment. And she was seeing her sister get her white coat put on. So I had literally this many visits with her. And she came in and I checked her and her breathing was atrocious. And we released her right pelvic floor and got it balanced between that. That then allowed her thoracic diaphragm to function better. And her right psoas opened up. 3 weeks later, she goes, Dr. Tom, I stopped all my meds. I'm like, wait, you did what? Literally didn't even ask her GI guy. He's like, ever since you treated me the one time, the next morning I woke up, had the biggest breath of my entire life. And then 3 weeks later, I've had no symptoms. 6 months after I saw her, she went to Kenya for 18 months and had no relapse. And so the story here, guys, is that I think what happened was, because Jana, you talked about 2 things that were really important, is oxygen in, nutrition in, and then the other part of this is the toxins out. And that's really a huge part of this cylinder you're talking about, is getting the toxins out. Everybody wants the latest and greatest drainer for their belly, their whole body, and then also their brain. And I'm like, hey, the greatest drainer is, like you mentioned, breathing, hydration, and sleep. So I just wanted to really highlight that. And one other little piece that I want to pull together for all us Lyme folks, that vagus nerve that a lot of you thought that Jana was about to say instead of the pudendal nerve, the beauty of the pudendal nerve going to the pelvic floor is it gets down to the pelvis through a different route than the vagus nerve. So the vagus is coming from the top to the diaphragm and also below into the colon and everything in your belly. And then the lower part of it is coming up from that pudendal. So listen to everything she's telling you. This is like the key to healing here, Jana.
Okay, and I want to just mention one thing and get into a little bit of the a little bit more of the spiritual realm. Let's just dip our toe there.
Just go for it.
All right, so
just dive in. No toes here. Just go.
Toes, dive in. Okay.
Head first. Let's go.
We're gonna cold plunge it. I love it. Okay, so here's the thing, and I just learned this recently, and I was like jaw dropped. Seriously. So here's a little. Did you know? The Latin root of pudendal is ashamed. Okay, so I'm just going to say it again. So the Latin root word for pudendal is ashamed. And if you think about the nerve, the main nerve that runs from our central processing unit down to the physicality of our pelvic floor, our genitals, right? And we carry so much stress and tension. There can be trauma in that area. There are amazing sensations. Sometimes there's no sensation. Sometimes there's painful sensations. And it's rooted in the word ashamed. And so I want to just help everyone understand. And somebody might be like, "What? I don't know what that means. Why does that matter?" Here's why it matters. Really, we cannot separate the physicality, the emotionality, and the spirituality of who we are as a being. All right. And it's not about religion and subscribing to a certain, church or mindset or framework. It's not at all. Spirituality really is, our connection to an energy center, a source that's greater than we are. And you may have felt very spiritual in moments where you're a part of a community where you're like, oh my gosh, look at the impact many can make. And I'm a part of this, right? And so when you think about this area being rooted in the energy and the frequency of ashamed, it shouldn't surprise us that for a lot of people, we don't name that area of our body. We talk about down there. We don't go to a medical practitioner when we have pain or we think maybe something's not right, because it can be shameful for a lot of us. And I want to just help everyone understand that when we can take information is simply information. So this summit that Dr. Tom is doing and offering you is information. What you choose to do with the information can completely change your life. So I want to encourage you to think about the information coming in through all these interviews over the length of this event. And then if we move from information to starting to process, it then becomes education, right? Education is what we can start to do to take inspired action. Then one step further is if we take that education and we live it and we bring it into our lives and we start to share it with others, that's when it becomes wisdom. And that's what Dr. Tom and I do, is we want to help you understand that, you do matter. Even if someone's told you there's nothing we can do, there is something you can do. And just taking in this information, and I know there's probably an amazing VIP opportunity here in the summit so that you can have this information for the rest of your life. Think of it like when I was young, my very best Christmas gift, if you guys can believe this, was a set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. They were burgundy. They had the gold edging on the pages. I thought I was like the cat's ass when I got those. I was in grade 3 and I went through these Encyclopedia Britannicas. That's what this experience is. And because there's so much information coming at you, you might miss something. So again, think of that information becomes education, becomes the wisdom that can really impact you from today until your very last breath on this earth.
Wow. It's so interesting. It's like I think that's like such wisdom, because we can get overwhelmed. There's so much info. And I think a lot of what we're doing with the summit is really to try to bring together people who look at healing holistically. We throw that word around so freaking much and drives me nuts. I'm like, the reality is your body knows how to heal itself. And I really love this concept that you mentioned a little while ago about if you're doing this like with your scalene muscles, which so many of us have. I mean, when you say that, people are going, oh my God, and like you feel it and everything. But you didn't say you're breathing wrong. I want everyone to be very, very clear. This is like so important. Jana did not say, hey, you're breathing incorrectly or wrong. It said you conditioned those muscles to do the breathing. So let's condition the primary muscle to do the primary breathing. And then you bring up this shame thing, because so much of it's like you're doing this incorrectly or you haven't taken the right action. I'm like, wow, that really just sets you up to feel like ashamed and like a piece of crap. And that has no place in healing, except in my world, at least, as a signpost. It's like a flashing neon light. Hey, this is a place where you might be able to talk to yourself a little differently. Because as Jana just pointed out, you've got this kind of energetic kind of place that starts with your root. And it's so interesting that you said pudendal is a shame, and you keep saying the root, and it's like, and your root chakra is there. So what about energy? Like what, if my pelvic and when we close, just you mentioned a little tool that can really help open up the pelvis. So I want to make sure we'll get back to that, but I want to keep going down this energy for just a minute here. So we've got the physicality and the breathing, and then the words that we're saying, the operating system that continually says positive or negative things throughout the day. But from an energetic perspective, what's going on with the pelvic floor and how does that relate to the rest of our body?
Yeah. So, whether you call them your energy centers, your chakras, whatever it is, I visualize them as these beautiful little spinning galaxies in our body, right? And there's 7 of them within the body, and then there's more outside of the body. And you mentioned, Dr. Tom, the psoas muscle. So I want to pull the psoas into this a little bit as well, because I feel like you cannot talk about the pelvic floor without the psoas. And so, gang, the psoas is located at the front of your body. It's like 2 pillars in our body. It's the only muscle group that attaches our legs to our spine. They attach on the inside of the long leg bone, just about a fist distance below the pubic bone on either femur, the big long leg bone. And then this muscle comes up through the pelvis and attaches on either side of the spine at all 5. So the first lumbar vertebrae, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Some say it goes to the 12th thoracic vertebrae, and then it attaches to each of the intervertebral discs. So if this muscle, this might gross some people out if you are vegetarians or vegans, but in a cow, this is the filet mignon cut of the animal, right? And you know that you're paying more for that filet than you would for, a different kind of steak. We are upright beings. All right. If we were all 4 beings, the psoas would always be really juicy. Because we're standing upright, it can become very, well, the opposite of juicy, very dry. It can shorten, it can hold. In utero, I'm obsessed with the psoas right now, so I'm just doing lots and lots of reading. In utero, the psoas literally absorbs energy from your mom. So if your mom was stressed out during her pregnancy with you, you as baby inside her belly are absorbing that. All right. And so these energy centers, and I want to specifically talk about the root chakra, the sacral chakra, and that solar plexus. So the first 3, kind of from the base of the tailbone up to just above the belly button. When we talk about feeling grounded and feeling confident and secure, that really is what, we talk about these energy centers. That's what they make us feel. The solar plexus is like the sun. It's this shiny, beautiful energy. And when we have pelvic floor dysfunction, or there's been trauma, or we don't want to talk about it, we become muted. These energy centers, they can either stop, like think of these little galaxies, they can either slow, they can get stuck, or in some cases, they can actually start spinning in the opposite way. So if you're someone who has been, and Dr. Amy Apigian, I interviewed her on my summit, and she said something so beautiful about trauma. She said trauma is defined as either too much too fast or not enough for too long. And so these energy centers can be impacted. And again, in my mind, trauma, before I talked to her, I was like, I've never experienced trauma, right? But after I talked to her, I was like, oh my gosh, of course I have, right? Of course I have. And so when we understand that these little galaxies are going to, like, 1,000,000% impact our physicality, and that often medications are symptom focused versus root cause focused, if you can understand that, then you can start to shed, like a snake sheds a skin. You can start to shed that. We take on the personality, I believe, of what we've been diagnosed with, or the medications that we feel like we need to serve us. And the more you understand that the basics of the breathing, the posture, we'll talk a little bit about the cooch ball, even just where we have our weight and our feet. Did you guys know that most people stand with 80% of their weight to the forefoot? The structure of the foot is not conducive to that. We've got a big bone at the back, the heel bone, called the calcaneus. And you don't have to be a structural engineer to understand that big, solid bones are meant to bear weight. Small little bones, fingers, toes, spine, are meant for movement. So simply, if you get stuck in that forward posture where you got about 80% of the weight in your feet, your root chakra, your sacral chakra, because of all the holding of the muscles so that you don't fall forward, they're going to get stuck. You are then going to feel less safe, less confident, less willing, or you might sit at a restaurant and have a menu in front of you and think, why am I so indecisive? I just have to order a meal. But those are the basic things that just start to happen when those energy centers are stuck.
It's so powerful because, like, I'm just thinking, like, nutrition, absorption, pooping or elimination or the lack thereof, just a little bit of weight forward or even weight too far back, posture or sideways or whatever, but bringing it back to the safety and the confidence to speak to yourself. And I just want to highlight that part of taking on the personality of what we've been diagnosed with. If everyone watching would, if you do this, please stop immediately. Stop calling yourself a limey, because it's a vibrational piece that is energetic and physiologic, and it expresses through your physicality, as Jan has been talking. And it's just like, you have a diagnosis of something. That's just a label that helps us understand what may have triggered the symptoms and potentially give us, a guideline of how to get you better. And it's not to not remember that you have this disease, but it's to not be defined by it. It is so critical, because then you can open this up and then you can start working on the things. Because I've seen so many people like, oh, I need more antibiotics because I'm a limey and limeys never get better. I'm like, well, maybe all you need to do is sort of work on your posture and your breathing. Because if you want to move your lymphatics and you want to, like, poop more and you want to get more oxygen, and I will say just a quickie on the top end of this, because we've talked a lot about the pelvic floor being the foundation, right? The other side of the foundation is that heavy bowling ball, Jana, that you talked about in the beginning. We just want, if we can get the posture of the lower part of the body better, then, and we can breathe better, then we don't have to rely on these scalenes, and then we get a little out of our head forward posture, which then will drain our brain better. So one of the things, because we could talk about this all day, and as you can tell, like, I'm like super nerding out as well. Like, I think I've said this at least twice already before, because I love the way the body functions, because it gives us the key and a roadmap to very simply unlocking dramatic healing. So one of the things that our folks, a lot of the people that I see, people who are diagnosed and experiencing Lyme disease, other co-infections, maybe mold illness, and even mast cell activation and things of that nature, they're like, whenever I ask them to do movement, they're like, I can't do that. I don't have the stamina. I don't have this and that. How do we access? Obviously, you gave us the simple breathing exercise with the hand over the sternum and then the hand over the belly button. And just over time, the awareness and breathing down into that our belly button will give us more. But what are next steps? How can we kind of, if people are living in chronic pain, how do we bring them into adding a little bit of movement? And what the hell, what the hell is this cooch ball thing?
Okay. So first of all, the movement part is really simple. Again, rooting back to Joe Pilates, he said the health of the body is dictated by the health of the spine. And so if you think of your spine, there's hundreds of thousands, millions of nerve endings that plug in like lights on a Christmas tree, right? And so the recipe for the spine is there's 5 different ways you can move your spine. And hey, Dr. Tom, is there an opportunity for me to give a gift?
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll definitely be putting all that in there. So
okay, perfect. So you know what I'm going to gift is, and I don't usually gift this as a summit, but it's perfect. I'm going to gift a course that I have. It's called Renew Your Body, Movement is Medicine. And what I'm going to talk about right now for the next 90 seconds is all in that gift. Okay. So we move your spine 5 ways. All right. So first, spinal flexion. When we round our spine forward, we get this visceral massage. Our organs get to interact with each other. And I'm not talking about like schlumpy posture as forward rounded spine. I'm talking about a little tuck of the tailbone. So you can feel like if you had to cinch up a belt 1 notch tighter, that's what I'm talking about, spinal flexion. All right. Spinal extension. If you were zipping up a jacket and you zipped up your jacket and you kept zipping and then you looked at a plane that was flying overhead, opening the heart, that heart chakra, the throat chakra, that's what happens on spinal extension. Spinal rotation takes the spine like a face cloth and wrings it out. We have all this amazing spinal fluid that needs movement. Twisting is important. Side bending is the 4th part of the recipe. And then if you can get on the floor or lay on your bed and just put your feet on the bed or on the floor, bend your knees, and just very slowly and small, just lift your hips off the ground, just so your tailbone gets a little higher than your heart. Then gravity can work on that spinal fluid in a different way. And that is the 5 simplest ways to start to bring movement into your life. You don't need to do high knees. You don't need to go, run to the end of the block. None of that. If you just start to move your spine, the entire body and all of its systems will become better because of that. So that's going to be in the gift that's going to be here in Dr. Tom's summit. Now, the cooch ball and the gooch ball were my answer to being very frustrated with my clients who, like I said, we're not talking about pelvic floor health, would not use the word vagina or, perineum or down there. And that's when you understand that nutrient-rich, oxygen-rich blood is required for a muscle fiber to thrive. Like if you don't water a plant for 6 weeks, it might still be living. The leaves are going to lose their vigor. The soil is going to be impacted by that. That's what happens when any muscle fiber is lacking blood flow. Then we have this amazing fascial tissue that's like a boa constrictor snake that wraps around every fiber. And if we're dehydrated, if we have a lack of oxygen, if we have poor posture, poor nutrition, that fascial tissue sticks to muscles, bones, organs, joints at the force of 2,000 pounds per square inch. So we've got all this force going on without us even knowing. And because we live on a planet with gravity and we are like the shape of a DNA helix, we get locked down and forward as we age. The cooch ball for girls, the gooch ball for guys is what I've created simply. And yes, and I named this baby, right? I've got 3 boys and then I named this baby in a way that would do exactly what you did, Dr. Tom, is you kind of giggle because you know what? That opens the door for me to start to educate that all this is a simple 3-minute practice every day where you sit on the ball, you use your diaphragm through the breathing that we talked about earlier, and we create this lift and lower in the pelvic floor. It really is beyond the Kegel. I also use my cooch ball for bloating, there's a series I've done for gut health. I do an anti-aging series on the face. I've helped so many people with sciatic pain, do some release through the back body, the psoas. Our body needs oxygen-rich, nutrient-rich blood, and it needs it beyond a lacrosse ball, people. I can go on and on about the lacrosse ball phenomenon. So that's what I did. I created a solution for what I believe most people. There was a piece of research done by Dr. Bruce Crawford, who's a urogynecologist, who said 90% of pelvic floor dysfunction in a man's body, and in a man's body, it shows as erectile dysfunction, incontinence, pelvic floor pain, hips, back. We talked about that. And in a woman's body, similar, but it might show itself as, urge incontinence or stress incontinence. Is that 90% of those cases, it's not really a medical issue. It's a fitness / movement issue. And if we improve our posture, improve our breathing, get our blood flow to a level where the body is flourishing, we can actually heal that in a very simple way.
Jana, that is sick. I love it. It's so good because like everyone's like, we're looking for the big shiny thing, the next latest, greatest thing to do. And if you unlock if your pelvic floor is stuck and you unlock it and you open the breathing, it works your way up. The sciatic goes away because you're loosening up the back. The psoas works, the thoracic breathing diaphragm works. Then we get all of that nice parasympathetic that comes with this. And you mentioned the heart and all this. We open all this up naturally by just, it unfolds from the root up physically, as well as sort of energetically and spiritually. So I'm so grateful to have you here to share this message, because I think that a lot of what we do with health is make it complex, and you boil it down to maybe a little localized exercise and then some breathing, right? As a foundation. Obviously, there's a lot more. And I just love the message of hope, because so many of the symptoms you mentioned are symptoms that are a part of being a human being. And they don't always fit into the category. Everybody tries to fit them into Bartonella or Lyme disease or mold. I'm like, well, maybe it's just you've got the head forward posture from your phone and then gravity. And then over time, it all kind of falls apart. But that one little key. So definitely grab a cooch ball or a gooch ball, whichever side you like to, look. And the thing about the thing that's so great about the giggle too is not only does it open a conversation, but there's a spark in your heart of just a moment of joy in what could otherwise be a shit show of a day most of the time. So I just appreciate that so much. I am so stoked about the Renew Your Body Movement is Medicine course that you give. That is just so amazing. So thank you. And I'm sure there's going to be a zillion people who want to, and that everyone needs to go check out your stuff. But if someone wants to follow you, learn more about what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah. So on social, the best place to follow me is on Instagram at Jana L. Дэниелсон. So it's Jana with one N, Jana L. Дэниелson. And then just, coochball.com is the best place to connect with me for the coochball. My online movement community is at the metadistrict.com. It's meta with 2 T's, which is a Buddhist word that means a place of love, non-judgment, and benevolence. So you can join me in the movement, my movement community at metadistrict.com. More info on the coochball at coochball.com or Jana L. Дэниелson on Instagram.
So cool. Well, Jana L. Дэnielson, thank you so very much. This is so, like, from a personal perspective, it's always great to have a conversation about anatomy and physiology and opening healing from that perspective. But from a practical perspective, that's really why I wanted to get together and have this conversation. And I think that well above anything I could have imagined, because to me, it's about igniting that spark where we can put in your hands, guys. Like, the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit is not just about getting you in front of the latest and greatest research, because that's always coming out. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of you are out there reading that all the time. So we're going to take some of that confusion out of that. But these kind of conversations are the ones that you might think, have overlooked, a place where you can bring back control of your healing back into your own body and reignite your own self-healing mechanism. And that's really my mission in the summit. So send a lot of love to Jana Дэниелson for this. Go check her out at coochball.com and metadistrict.com, Instagram, all that awesome love. And until next time, I can't wait to see you in our next episode of the Healing from Lyme Disease Summit. Talk to you then.